What's going on, everyone? Matt Savoca here from the Stokastic Best Ball YouTube channel, and we are back talking about one of the most important fundamentals at this point in best ball drafts, particularly in tournaments: stacking. We're going to start at the very beginning. What is stacking? Why do we do it? Why is it important? And I think it's a really, really good back to basics video. If you're new to best ball as a format, this is going to be incredibly informative. And if you're an old veteran, you might know some of this stuff, but it's good to make sure that you have a foundation for why we're doing this whole stacking thing. And here to break it down with me today is Nick Lepri at Notorious FNTSY. Nick, how are you this morning?
I'm doing excellent today, and I do think that this is a very good topic to discuss, even if people have been playing best ball for some time, because we can really kind of explain why we do these things, as well as talking about why someone may want to go super stack heavy at the end of the video when we discuss a draft that I've done.
Yeah, if we're talking about Underdog Fantasy, today's sponsor for the video, the winner on the Best Ball Mania 2 tournament in 2021 had a massive Cincinnati stack, like a 5-player stack that
Yeah.
ultimately helped propel them to the Best Ball Mania championship. So just like we've seen in DFS, also follow our Stokastic DFS channel at Stokastic DFS. You guys, this is one of the most important ways to differentiate your lineups and one of the most important ways to use the positive correlations, the positive statistical correlations we know that can help you get to abnormally high scoring fantasy weeks. And that's really what you need to win these tournaments. So let's start with a basic definition. Stacking is obviously typically when we talk about a quarterback and a receiver stack, but it goes further than that at this point. Nick, can you give us a solid definition and then I'll chime in as well?
Yeah, for me, the most basic definition of it, and then there's probably a couple other definitions you can go with that I'll talk about as well, would be stacking your quarterback with a receiver or a tight end. But you
Mhm.
could also go with, if you're talking more of a stack heavy type of approach, you could go a quarterback, you can go with multiple wide receivers, and then their tight end, or you can even get a little bit fancy, a little bit cute if you believe that this is going to be a running back that's going to be catching some passes, like, say, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, for getting a little bit crazy and want to draft Baker Mayfield, then you can draft those players as well to stack with your quarterback. And then there's also stacking that doesn't involve your quarterback. If you're not going for the full team stack, you can just draft multiple receivers from the same team to do the exact same thing, but without the quarterback.
Well said. Stacking is our fancy word for combining players from the same team. And
Yeah.
as Nick craftily pointed out, it typically starts with the quarterback and their receivers. Their first, second, or third receiver options are typically the most common stack options, but we've seen that expand, especially with pass catching running backs. And then there are some secondary ways that you'll see stacking happen, particularly when it comes to best ball. Not just team stacks, but their opponent
Yeah.
also is worthwhile to consider in those situations, because what we know from our DFS fundamentals is that if a quarterback and receiver are outpacing their projection expectations, then the likelihood that their opponent's quarterback and receiver are outpacing theirs increases as well. And so what you'll also see is people calling what we call a run back option or a bring back option. So you'll grab the opponent of those teams. And so in best ball, we're grabbing opponents of our quarterback receiver stacks from week 16 and week 17. And then we're also creating secondary stacks, which, as you pointed out, Nick, can not involve a quarterback because we can only start one. So that means a running back receiver combo or a receiver tight end combo, or essentially bringing the amount of players from one game that we see on the schedule and saying this is going to outpace expectations more so than the others. And I think what's really interesting is in these drafts, we ultimately end up with a quarterback 2 and a quarterback 3. And that
Yeah.
gives us more opportunities to stack, not only from a team standpoint, but from a game standpoint. And this is actually one of the things we were talking about before the stream started, Nick. I think we need to think real here at Stokastic, we need to think about giving the people a tool that helps them with exactly that. So, we're going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out the best way to build out game stacks and team stacks. And then not only that, but division stacks as well. How heavy are you weighting game stacks in your best ball drafts this year, Nick?
I am viewing it not necessarily as the number one priority, especially when it comes to game number 17, or not game number 17, week number 17, because I think it's perfectly fine to sprinkle some week 16. Make sure you get to week
Hmm.
17, right? Kind of that thought process as well. But I do definitely look at it. I do have the schedule. Kind of a bit of it is memorized in my brain with some of the teams that I'm stacking all the time, but other times I'm having to go to ESPN or any other place where you can find the schedule. But yeah, I do definitely weigh it pretty highly. And I'm starting to really try to make sure that I'm not over influencing my draft by it and not just reaching crazy later on in the draft to go ahead and get these game stacks that may not even end up working out.
Yeah. Well, there's always some risk here. And we should say, if you're trying to win a tournament, you should be taking on some risk. We're going for best
Oh,
case
definitely.
scenarios. So, absolutely fine. And I should also mention, we at Stokastic have best ball rankings and projections available. And part of the points added calculations that we do on the back end involve upside scores and playoff scores. So if you think we're not considering week 16, week 17 opponents and weighing it into our numerical projections, you would be quite wrong. And what's really cool about the package this year is you can buy it for the season, the entire NFL season. That helps you all through fantasy draft season. And you're going to get rankings for all sports on Underdog as we start to build out our whole best ball platform. And also drafters, DraftKings. We don't really talk about them because they're not the sponsor of this particular video, but our best ball package has certainly got you covered. We've even got different projections for tournaments and cash games. That's how seriously we are taking the differences in those two games, even if it's the same platform altogether. Truly one of the best ways you can play. And we've got a promo coming up early next week. If you're a little bit on the fence right now and you're not sure, stick around. Stokastic Best Ball. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and you will find out soon enough how you might be able to get a deal on that brand new Best Ball NFL package. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about how we can further the stacking the concept, how we can further this just a little bit. And I mentioned it, we talked about game stacks already, but now I want to talk about divisional stacks. At this point, I think it's very clear to say that some divisions have much more typical shootout potential than others. We can probably say them off the top of your head. The AFC North, the AFC West for sure. Those are the two that come to mind for me first and foremost. And that means even if I have Patrick Mahomes and I know that they're not playing a couple AFC West teams in the actual playoffs. I know they're playing the Raiders a couple times. I know they're playing the Chargers a couple times. So just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all right, maybe I bump Keenan Allen, Mike Williams up a spot. I know that Darren Waller is going to go maybe a little bit higher up in my rankings, just in the back of my mind in a best ball draft, because I will have game stacks throughout the season that could theoretically outpace their projections. So it's not as important. It's sort of a back of the mind thing, but it is something that I am absolutely taking into consideration. Division stacks. And you know what? I'm leaning in when I take weird divisions. Like if I have some AFC, I have a bunch of AFC South. No one really likes Houston or Indy or Tennessee, but you know what? They may end up with bad enough defenses in that division where the shootout potential actually increases by the end of the year. And by the way, they still got the Jags in that division as well. Division stacking, I think that is the third level here. How important are you considering that, Nick?
Yeah, when I'm doing drafts, I definitely keep in mind to that, especially with its when it's a division that I like. They don't even necessarily have to be the craziest divisions that you named off. Like if I'm doing a draft and I take Jalen Hurts, then maybe I'm going to be a little bit more interested in the NFC East. Try to go ahead and take maybe one of those late round wide receivers for the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe reach up on Dalton Schultz. So I definitely do keep in mind the divisions, especially when I want to go ahead and form this team that I believe is going to have the best chance to compete and go ahead and make its way through the playoffs and potentially win the whole thing. I do the same thing with the AFC East. Anytime I draft any of those Patriots players, I just take a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of Jets players or Dolphins players. I think that's going to help us out a ton. Obviously, the Bills as well.
That's how you deal with your Miami Dolphins obsession, is just the backdoor division stacking way. That's very
Yeah.
clever while keeping your game theory hat on as well. So we thought it would be a good idea to bring up one of our many drafts, and obviously stacking occurs in almost 100% of our drafts. So we're talking about a stack heavy draft. You can come up with your own definition of stack heavy. Why don't you get stacked heavier than this? I dare you. Go for it. But we figured we'd head over to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, show you an actual draft that was completed here. And by the way, guys, if you haven't signed up over there, please use promo code AWESEMO when you do and deposit $100 because you will get $100 free back. Free money is very hard to come by in sports betting, fantasy football, and best ball. And this is one of those rare opportunities. Promo code AWESEMO, our old name, a little housekeeping as we get things moved over all to the Stokastic name. It gives you a first match deposit bonus up to $100. That gives you 4 free entries to their Best Ball Mania 3 tournament, which has got 3 opportunities to win $1 million. I so want to be that person who wins the regular season $1 million and is just sitting in the playoffs smoking cigars because they already won $1 million with a chance to win 2 more. And there's also these puppy tournaments that they've had throughout the summer, $5 entry fees. That first match deposit bonus can give you 20 free entries. Again, promo code AWESEMO. Check it out. Let's go check out one of these drafts. Nick, bring us through this team, your thought process, and then we'll go to the draft board to how it all came together.
Yeah, so this team here, I went very heavy on the 2 teams with the quarterbacks that I have on this team, as you can see on the right side of the screen, which is Patrick Mahomes and Daniel Jones. So Chiefs and New York Football Giants heavy. My running backs were DeAndre Swift, James Conner, Josh Jacobs, Melvin Gordon, and Ronald Jones. While I did say that you can definitely stack running backs with the quarterbacks, I did not do it in this draft, but I have definitely done it before. For the wide receivers, we have Darnell Mooney, Sky Moore for the Chiefs with the Chiefs stack. Tyler Lockett, Kenny Golladay to match with Daniel Jones, Jamison Crowder, Wan'Dale Robinson to match with Daniel Jones, Justin Ross to match with Patrick Mahomes, James Washington, and then Sterling Shepard on the hope that maybe he does end up returning this season. If he does, I think Sterling Shepard honestly is one of the more talented wide receivers on the Giants. I think he would see a solid role. So I drafted him at the end, and then we have Travis Kelce to match with the Chiefs, obviously, and then Hunter Henry. Now, I understand that some people might not want to do this because this is very stack heavy, right? It's a 5 stack towards the Chiefs, a 4 stack towards the Giants. But if you really think these 2 players are going to really help you out a ton, if you think Patrick Mahomes is going to continue to play great, if you think Daniel Jones is going to take that next step up, I see no reason why multiple receivers on these teams can't have great games, especially Travis Kelce. I mean, that's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, after you go Kelce, you end up getting that KC stack started. And so, you start at the top, right? You pick Kelce, and then you're like, all right, maybe this is on. Now, I thought that was a great way to break down our first level, our team stacks. He did a great job grabbing a bunch of Giants, being unique with it, too. I think Wan'Dale and Sterling Shepard, a lot of smart analysts are saying that they are possibly the ones that cannibalize each other. We don't know that. We don't know what the injuries are going to be like. We don't know what Kadarius Toney's status is going to be like at that point in the season. It's very possible that by the end of the season, Jones is throwing to Wan'Dale and Sterling Shepard, and that's a great way to be unique in that team stack regard. Now, let's look at some second-level stuff that you also accomplished very, very well. We got Tyler Lockett, one of Seattle's best options. I know the quarterback situation is terrible, but he is playing the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 16. And then I noticed one of your running backs, a Denver Bronco, whom the Kansas City Chiefs are also facing in Week 17. So talk about filling those secondary stacks. We're getting a part of this whole Kansas City-Denver game. We have so many players from that Week 17 game. That is not a bad game to be betting all your chips on at the end of the season. So I really, really like how you built that out there. I also see some divisional stacks in there as well. If you scroll down to see the receivers, he's got Kenny Golladay, Wan'Dale Robinson, and then he adds James Washington from the Dallas Cowboys. Again, not huge sway in the way that he drafts, but he is showing you the way that you can use 3 layers of stacking in order to help you decide, especially towards the end of your drafts when it's sort of a pick-em process for many people. I actually like James Washington, especially with Gallup still recovering from that knee injury. So let's go to the draft board real quick. And Nick, explain how your thought process changed. Obviously, you're at the 12. You take Kelce. What happens from there?
Yeah, so after I take Travis Kelsey, I think it's basically wide open on what I want to do here. There's a couple of players that I really liked. I think you can take in this range. Now, obviously, I wouldn't take Mark Andrews. Well, I do like Mark Andrews because I already drafted Kelsey. So I said, you know what? Let me just take the best running back available in my mind. And that was either going to be Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, or Aaron Jones. I think that most people would take Joe Mixon there. So I went with DeAndre Swift to get a little bit different. The draft came
Love
back
it.
my way, and then I decided, you know what? I drafted Travis Kelsey. Why not get Patrick Mahomes? I understand that's going to be kind of difficult to figure out who Patrick Mahomes' number one receiver is going to be. Is it going to be Juju? Is it going to be MVS? Could it be Justin Ross? Who's it going to be? I know for sure that when I draft Travis Kelsey, he is going to be seeing a shit ton of targets. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just draft Patrick Mahomes. This makes sense. Let me get that stack that a lot of people might be waiting on now because they're a little bit nervous about the wide receiver. So I get Mahomes, it swings back, and then I'm thinking, you know what? Let me just get another running back that I think has top 10 potential, and then maybe we could fade away from running back unless I find a value. So I go with James Conner because I think in Arizona this year, they lose Chase Edmonds. He could have some solid value. And then the draft comes around a million picks later, and I take Darnell Mooney. I think Darnell Mooney is the clear number one wide receiver on the Chicago Bears. I understand that Justin Fields didn't really show out last year, but I do think in his second year with a head coach that isn't brain dead, I think Darnell Mooney could really step up. And then I come back and I take Josh Jacobs. I don't love Josh Jacobs this year, but it seems like people are really talking negatively on him when in reality, I think he's a 3 down back for the team. So I said, you know what? I already have the Chiefs stack. Let me go ahead and get a Las Vegas Raider to match in with the
Exactly what I
division.
was going to point out. Exactly where Josh Jacobs at that point in the draft, it's about his ADP, right? And you have
Yeah.
two running backs. You want the possibility of the three horsemen, the three RB1 starting, three RB1s leading the way for your team. So you build in that possibility. It's not the only way to draft, but Jacobs at that spot, especially considering the divisional stack, I think was just fine.
Yeah, definitely. And I always try to keep in mind the divisional things. And then after that, the draft swings back around. I go with Sky Moore. Again, not completely sold in on Sky Moore, but there is a chance that he is the number one receiver on the team. And when I'm building this team out, that's what I'm assuming. After that, I go with Tyler Lockett, a player that I am not in love with, but I think has a lot of upside. I was kind of sad that Baker didn't go there because I think with Baker, Lockett could have a great season, but maybe Geno Smith or my boy Drew Lock can get him the ball. And then I start thinking, you know what? I kind of like the Giants a decent amount. I'm pretty high on the Giants. I don't think there's much of a difference between Kadarius Toney and Kenny Galladay. They only go a couple of picks difference in this draft, right? We see Toney go at 103, Galladay at 108. I think that is going to be pretty normal, but a lot of time you see Toney definitely go first. So I go with Galladay. I think Galladay had a bad season last year. He's going to bounce back. They pay him all this money. He'll be just fine. And then I come back and I see Melvin Gordon. I'm like, you know what? That's the stack for at the end of the season. That is a division stack as well. I really do not believe Javonte Williams is the clear number one running back, meaning that he's going to be seeing like 65% of touches. I think Melvin Gordon is going to kick down the door like the Kool-Aid man and continue to run in a bunch of touchdowns. So I like Melvin Gordon still. I'm very confident in him. So I take him. And then I forgot to mention this earlier. I do take Ronald Jones. Now, this is probably the more unorthodox version of the Chiefs running backs you want to be taking because most people think, oh, when you draft the quarterback, you want to get the guy that's going to be catching passes. Well, if they get on the 1 yard line and Pat Mahomes doesn't score, I'm thinking Ronald Jones is going to be the one who scores, not Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because Ronald Jones is built like a wrecking ball and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is very small. So I'm thinking Ronald Jones is going to be stealing the touchdowns. So let me draft him. Then I go with Jamison Crowder upside for the Bills. And then I obviously take the quarterback in Daniel Jones. Hunter Henry doesn't really have too much correlation to this draft. He is just my favorite tight end going in this range. Then I go Wandale, Justin Ross, obviously for the connection with the quarterbacks. James Washington, because I really believe that if Michael Gallup's injury is serious, at least the first couple of weeks, James Washington could be the number 2 receiver if Jalen Tolbert doesn't elevate immensely. And that also correlates with the Giants because they're in the same division. And then I take the shot on Sterling Shepard again. When is Sterling Shepard going to be healthy? We still don't know. But if something was to happen to any of the other wide receivers, then Sterling Shepard could step in. And we have seen Sterling Shepard play quite well in the past. Again, he's not a wide receiver one, but you're drafting him in the 18th round with the upside that he does see some playing time. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yep, great job here. Got enough running backs in the mid rounds so that you could just take all wide receiver upside at the end, especially because you had elite quarterback picks and elite tight end picks, and you chose to go 2 and 2 absolutely a viable option when you set up your draft this way. And great job not leaning too hard into the secondary stack. Sterling Shepard as a secondary Giants wide receiver to just build out the stack with the final pick in the draft. In my opinion, that is absolutely risk free. Even if you look from a game situation standpoint that Wandale and Sterling Shepard, when both are healthy, are going to be competing for slot snaps. We don't know that stuff. Let's just see if the Giants turn out better than expected. And I think Daniel Jones, with that sneaky rushing upside in this contract year and a new offensive coordinator, I think he's got some seriously sneaky upside. Not my favorite quarterback by any stretch, but if you told me he outpaced ADP expectations by several rounds, we already know how it happens, right?
Yeah, it's from running the ball, and it makes perfect sense that, I mean, look, last year Joe Judge was basically an imbecile, so I mean, I would think that Daniel Jones would step up with one of the smarter incoming head coaches, right? You would think that Brian Daboll would be very helpful for Daniel Jones.
I have high hopes for that offense going forward with Daniel Jones or with a new quarterback in 2023. Eventually, we'll see that franchise turn it around. I digress. This was a great example of a stack heavy draft, and I think it exemplifies all the three layers of stacking that we talked about today. Nick, great breakdown. Follow him at Notorious FNTSY. You can follow me at Draftaholic. Thanks so much for hanging out. Give us a like and subscribe if you liked what we're up to. If you didn't like what we're up to, also leave a comment. Tell us what you would like here on the Stokastic Best Ball channel. We're having a lot of fun building out our best ball product, our best ball specific content for you guys. We think it is such a fun way to play. Remember to use promo code AWESEMO when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy. For Nick, I'm Matt. We'll see you guys later.